We're really excited at GMI to be putting out a new book called Serving God in Today's Cities. And this book is written by Patrick Johnstone, the founder of Operation World, and Dean Merrill, who works with thought leaders to bring their works to life. And we're so excited to have Dean here today to talk about this new book. So Dean, thank you so much for being with us today. Dean, you've worked with so many authors over the years. What was it like working with Patrick Johnstone on this book, Serving God in Today's Cities?
I really appreciated working with him. I mean, here's a guy who grew up in England, came right out of college, and sensed that he belonged in God's service overseas. I mean, went from college, University of Bristol, straight to the townships of South Africa during the apartheid era, and was slammed in the face with urban poverty at some of its worst. And that's where he began to minister, and has spent his whole life since then, all kinds of places. Was on one of the Logos ships that traveled from port to port, serving people who would come to find out about the gospel. So there's hardly any place he's not been, and hardly any city that he doesn't know. The man is a huge wealth of information.
Cities have been around forever, of course. So why is it that we are now calling this 21st century the first true urban century?
Because of what's happening to the numbers. I mean, we've got, what do they say, 7.2 billion people on this planet right now. Projection from the UN, and they're doing very careful studies, is that by the end of this century, in 2100, we will be up to 11 billion. That's another 50% gain. And most of that is going to happen in cities. It is just incredible when you start looking at the numbers. The biggest city in the world in 2050 is estimated going to be Lagos, 62 million. Now, I've been to Lagos. I mean, today it's a crazy place. 62 million, I can hardly imagine it. Right under that, Mumbai at 50 million, Karachi, Pakistan, 50 million. I mean, how much is 50 million? Think about New York City with all of its masses. That's three New Yorks side by side would be 50 million people. And so by the year 2100, they say the world will be 90% urban. We crossed the tipping point 6-7 years ago when we got past 50% being in urban areas, and it's only going to just skyrocket from there.
One of the chapters in this book is talking about what God thinks about the cities. Dean, why don't you share with us a little bit about what the Bible teaches us about cities, urban people, and urban ministry?
God cares about cities, and you see it all through Old Testament and New Testament. Take, for example, God's concern for a big city, a major capital in the Middle East called Nineveh. And he says to Jonah, I really want you to go there. I want you to get into that city. And Jonah doesn't want to do it, and we all know the story of how that played out. But in fact, God's message of grace and forgiveness is received in Nineveh, from the king all the way down, to Jonah's great surprise. God gets some great things done in that city, and you see the same thing in the New Testament.
Urban ministry is obviously not one size fits all. In the book, it talks about several ways in which people can be on mission in urban centers. Talk to us about a few of the different ways that you highlighted in the book with Patrick.
People are on the move. When people feel like they need to go somewhere else, they usually wind up in cities. And so whether you call it, in South Africa it was called the townships, India will call it slums, Brazil will call it the favelas, whatever, the immigrants come and they have to figure out, where do I go and how do I find a job and what do I do? It's even harder if they don't know the language, if they've got to learn something. I mean, when somebody leaves the rainforest of Sumatra and lands in Jakarta, you got to function in Indonesian. You can't be using whatever language you brought from the village. And all of that is a place for the gospel to be of service and to say, come, we'll help you, we'll teach you, we'll offer free language classes, we'll help you get started. Patrick Johnstone says, from what his research shows, is you've got a short window, however. You've got no more than 5 years, maybe 3 years, to help that new arrival get settled.
So now if someone wants to get involved in urban ministry and consider what role they might have in reaching the cities with the hope of Christ, what are some things that you would recommend they do or think about as they begin that process of seeking God on getting involved in ministry in the cities?
Well, I think this book is a good introduction to it because it will expose the reader to all kinds of ministries all over the world. It's not just American, it's not just European, it's in many, many places. And you see different formats of ministry going on, and most of the chapters have a question list at the end. Ask yourself these questions. That's a way to explore maybe what God has called you to do. But I have to remember, it's not my job or Patrick Johnstone's job to recruit. That's up to the Lord of the harvest.
Dean, as you were working with Patrick and working on this project and just immersing yourselves in what it means to reach the cities, what was probably the strongest insight for you as an author and collaborator about the significance and the impact of urban ministry?
I think the greatest mind shift for me in this project was to get past the point of thinking that cities are a problem and come instead to the mindset that I think God has, which is cities are a great opportunity. This is where people are who need the Lord, and we can make some great things happen for the kingdom here. I love the line from Dwight L. Moody, the famous American evangelist from 100 years ago. And Moody said at one point, if we reach the cities, we will reach the nation. If we fail to reach the cities, they'll become a cesspool that infects the nation. I think he was exactly right 100 years ago, and it's all the more true today, both in the country where I live and the country where you live and the countries all around the world. This is opportunity. This is harvest time.